Well, joining us now in the studio is UFC trainer Mike Angove. He's part of City Kickboxing. What a setup. It is the talk of the world in combat sports. Mike, welcome along. How are you, man?
Yeah, not bad, not bad. Good to be here.
Are you incredibly surprised by how much attention globally City Kickboxing has now because you've got such an awesome stable of fighters?
I don't think I'm surprised globally. I think within New Zealand is probably more to the point. Globally, we've been recognised well before we hit the mainstream in New Zealand as a top gym.
Yeah.
But in terms of being embraced by New Zealand as part of the mainstream, that's been huge for us. And it's after the Hellbergs, it was actually quite gratifying because I was probably the cheerleader with the shortest skirt.
Yeah, mate,
and the
you were coming in hot.
So good.
But that's been really pleasing because in New Zealand we're quite conservative with our values and how we approach things, and with guys like
that room is stiff. Like that is the stiffest room, that Hellberg night. It is. I've been in that room a few times, John. I don't know if you have as well.
Yeah, a couple of times.
It is dry balls.
Oh, look, and Izzy got up there in his felt sort of orange Kumara jacket and just kind of went, "Hey, what's up, guys?" And he hit the right note. Yeah. But what's been really good since then is, for example, Nolene Taurua asked Izzy, Eugene and myself to go in and have a chat at their high performance culture over the Christmas break. And that's, when you're getting invited in by other coaches in a completely different sport, that's a nice acknowledgement, that actually what we're doing, not only is it working, but it's being acknowledged. And also, someone like Nolene, who's such a fantastic coach, that's nice to, I guess for Eugene in particular, being head coach, nice to know that that they're regarding each other as peers because of their success on global.
See the Silver Ferns doing some arm bars in the Constellation Cup, or
mate, double leg takedowns all around.
Shoot the takedown.
How long have you been working at City Kickboxing, and how long have they been around? Have they been around ages? Because we've only just started to hear it.
Yeah. Well, overnight success never happens overnight.
Yeah.
You're talking about guys. There's a core coaching group of 5 or 6 guys who've worked and trained together for 20, in some cases 30 years. All have had success internationally. In combat sports. And look, City Kickboxing, I think it's probably 15, 16, 17 years. Wow. In fact, it went back beyond that. Doug and Eugene bought it off a guy, Dwan Marshall, who was also formerly from Balmoral League, and it used to be based in Kingsland. And it's growing slowly. And the work that Eugene has done, off the smell of an oily rag, is huge. Even Israel, 10 years ago, maybe 11 years ago now when I first met him, and then when he came into the gym, that's a lot of planning and a lot of learning, a lot of blood, sweat and tears. And yeah, it's great to get that recognition now, but it's due to, probably, generations of experience, and now just synergizing together at the right time.
Yeah, you've been a world champion in kickboxing yourself. So when you saw Israel Adesanya walking into the gym, were you like, here's a guy who can take over the world?
Well, he actually walked in for Huge, and Huge was like, yeah, okay, mate, I've seen you fight once. It was a bit average. Maybe you should go and consider other gyms. Huge will tell that story. But look, I met Israel and Wanganui, 12 months or so before he did come up, and I remember having a conversation with him in a bar, because that's a place where all important sporting decisions are made, and just saying, look, you need to go to where the best coaches are, and the best coaches are up in Auckland right now, and if that's your goal, that's where you need to be. And he made that decision, packed his stuff up and came up there. And it's something I could relate to, because I did the same in my third fight. I think I hopped into my mate's Mini, which kept on running out of water about every hour or so. So we had bottles and bottles of water that we put it up, and we drove to Auckland. I had a fight, and then I moved to Auckland within 6 months. you know, and were sleeping on a floor for a long time. So that's the kind, and those stories. You can see them repeat over and over again in martial arts and with athletes. They're chasing a dream.
Yeah.
You know, Brad Riddell originally from Christchurch. Dan Hooker's been around the world with what he's done. You know, just pursuing a dream with a single-minded passion. So, yeah, nice that you've got a few crazy nut bars like that all together in one place.
How did you meld all those personalities together? Because the city kickboxing looks incredibly tight-knit. Like lockdown and quarantine have messed up the ability for everybody to have everybody's back, as we've seen of late. But where does that come from? Because you all stayed in the gym during lockdown.
Yeah, look, obviously, I think a lot of credit actually needs to go to Eugene for that. He's a man who can bring together 4 or 5 coaches on their own with different personalities, different strengths and weaknesses. And then similarly with the fighters, and when you're talking about creating a high performance culture, it's creating a culture which is self-regulating, self-managing. You know, you kind of have your no dickheads policy, but in actual fact, it's the fighters who kind of police that in a lot of ways. You don't have any man greater than the sum of the parts, and you've got some rock stars in there, and you have to manage that as well. You know, so I think a lot of the credit actually goes to Eugene in terms of his values, his morality, and his ability to draw people together and kick the occasional posterior when required.
Yeah.
And then he mentioned this in a talk we gave not so long ago. After a while, the group starts to police itself. Because if you set the right structures and parameters and benchmarks, you know, people who fall outside of that will either conform or, you know, quietly exit the door, usually courtesy of a double leg.
Yeah, that's it. And so a lot of it, obviously, you know, there's the training aspect of it, but what I'm fascinated about the fighters is the psychological element to it. And is that something that, as you guys as coaches, that you work with the fighters on, or is that something that they bring individual philosophies and that kind of thing to you, or do you guys have a city kickboxing philosophy that you impart on them? How much of that?
So I think you got to remember, like, psychology is a part of it, but every person is different and everyone's triggers are different. You know, someone might be driven intentionally by competition. Someone else might be driven, you know, I don't know, because he's bullied as a kid and has decided to dominate. Like that, You know, you have to look at what are the individual's triggers and what motivates them, and that again comes back to a coaching relationship. And different coaches will have stronger relationships with different athletes, or you know, you'll have guys who have sort of skills dealing with a certain personality type. And as I say, Eugene is very good at sort of managing that and massaging that out. You know, and you've got some good coaches. You know, you've got some great coaches there. You know, Doug Viney, who's taking charge of the boxing team, who's the co-owner of the gym. He's got his own sort of personal style that works really well. You know, with certain fighters, I'll have my own style. You know, Tristram has his own style. Eugene is a mad scientist that melds it all together. Yeah. So yeah, psychology is a part of it, but it's dependent on the individual. And any good coach will tell you that you've got to key into what works for an individual. Yeah,
and you're talking about like Eugene and all of you guys running things off an oily rag. When it started, like with the UFC, started to happen, and obviously it's a huge organization, and they're like, seeing this expectation that you guys have this, you know, this amazing gym going on. How much was it faking it until you made it type situation? And did you have to sort of have it bravado, like, yeah, we've got this covered, and it actually going, oh, geez.
I don't know. We just deal with the hand that we're played.
Yes.
And look, there's goals in mind, and those goals have been set in stone quite some time ago. For all the individual athletes, they'll have particular goals, and you give them a time frame, and how do you push them towards towards whatever their goal is. In this case, obviously, the UFC is considered a pinnacle in MMA. There's no faking it until you make it. Yeah. It is born out of hard work, grind, you know, being very, very particular and methodical about your approach. This is what you need to do. This is how we need to get there. And you take knocks and lumps along the way, but you maintain good standards. You, when you lose, you review and you look at how you improve. And you can't be satisfied with reaching a pinnacle. Oh, great! We've got 2 UFC champions. We've got another 2, should be 3 inside the top 5. Top 10. But you can't sit on that because everyone's got tape. Everyone's watching what you're doing. So you've always got to be looking for a new, not so much a new angle, but you've got to be advancing where you are because the game is moving so fast. If you think of Ronda Rousey as a good example in the women's game, I won't say she was a one-trick pony, but one trick was better than the other tricks that she had.
Sure.
And you look at in a few short years, less than the span of a decade, how far that game has come.
Because Holly Holm, she surprised everybody who was on the Ronda Rousey training, except for probably people who went, "Oh no, Ronda's always been ahead, but everything else below has caught up," and that was a turning point, a tipping point.
I mean, when you've got a strength and it's your key, how do you stop that strength? And Holly used her strengths and popped her from the outside and stopped. There's a few technical aspects to what she did in the wrestling and the grappling that stopped her from securing. The head and arm throw and the and the arm bar, which was her go-to. But there's a whole bunch. You go and look into that and you see some of the technical things that she did there. And they also recognised a weakness that, and that's the thing with grappling too. You have to get your hands on before you get punched in the face. And all fights start standing up. So a striker initially, if they have confident defence, actually has that initial advantage. So the technology is moving.
So is it like Poirier kicking Conor in the leg 18 times? Because his stance opens himself up to being kicked in the leg.
Well, I would say even also that had changed, right? Because Conor had been out for a year or so, and I don't know.
So there's a couple of things there. I mean, I was watching tape of Conor before that fight, and he's never checked particularly well. He's always been front foot heavy, and they've made a big fuss about him being long stance and then moving into a boxing stance. But if you watch his tape, he's actually, when he gets into mid-range, which is boxing, his feet come together. The thing though, the calf kicks have been around for years and years and years in Muay Thai, and kickboxing. It's just that MMA has gone, oh, those are a good idea. Maybe I should use them. And they're so debilitating. And Conor, ring rust, fighting a guy who's been fighting right at the pinnacle. He's had a lot of time out. He's never been particularly great at checking. And he was winning the fight. But that's the story we've seen over and over again in every stadium, in every show, in New Zealand and around the world, of some guy who's a good puncher getting his legs kicked out from under him, winning the first round, even winning the second round, and then ending up not being able to bridge the gap and just getting pumped. And that's what happened there. There's a little bit more to it than that. But yeah, the game moves, and the minute you sit on your laurels, you're stuffed.
Yeah, so when we look at Izzy's next fight, young Blachowicz going up a weight class, Izzy, amazing striker, best in the world at striking or best in the UFC at striking? Why don't people just try and take him down? I know this is a very simple, simplistic guy who's never been into a fight before kind of comment, but he's an amazing striker, so wouldn't you want to try and get him on the mat somehow?
So Yoel Romero, the Olympic silver medalist, did not take him down.
Yeah.
I think he momentarily got him down, but Israel got up. The only one who has been moderately successful there was Marvin Vettori early on in his career, and Israel has constantly made adjustments. He's very hard to take down.
Yeah,
he looks
otherwise,
like he's really
otherwise
diligent.
they would.
Yeah, he looks really diligent at sticking to a fight plan, and executing it. Like, he doesn't get drawn in, he doesn't lose. The fitness stays with him, so he doesn't mentally fatigue. Like, he just looks like he is the complete fighter for that fight.
Yeah, I mean, Israel's had over 100 fights. There's a lot. Like I said, overnight success doesn't happen overnight. So there's a big toolkit he can draw on. But the thing is, he's constantly evolving his game and constantly working on where are my weaknesses and where do I need to fill out those deficits. And that's not just Israel, that's everyone. So this next fight is a big challenge because you've got a guy, Blachowicz is...
is that how you say his name?
Blachowicz, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Not Blachowicz.
Blankovic.
Yeah, I gave it a crack. It's actually my job to get people's names right.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah,
You should stop
after all
calling him
those years
Jan
of
as well.
Polynesian names, mate. Blachowicz, don't worry, I've stuffed it up too on air. And look, he's big.
Yep.
He's a naturally very big man. He's strong. He's got a far better ground game than people realise. Very strong on top. And he's got a jiu-jitsu black belt, and he's also a former world Muay Thai champion in IFMA. So he comes with a very good pedigree. He's also a guy who's ground his way to the top. He's taken his knocks, and he's consistently improved. So he presents a difficult challenge. Israel's clearly faster. He's clearly slicker. But Blachowicz does enough odd that we won't go into too much. But he does enough to present a real dangerous challenge. You don't want the guy grappling with you, particularly when he'll have a weight advantage. You don't want him on top of you. Invariably, he'll probably try that. But the four-wheel drive has to keep up with the Ferrari before it can bump him off the road.
Yeah,
that's a big thing.
What's it like being on the road with Izzy? Like, he's such a global phenomenon. You're there with him in his camp, travelling around hotels, hanging out with him. What's it like being in his crew?
Mate, we're still complaining at each other for borrowing each other's undies. So. I'm like watching a press conference and going, "There's my Bruce Lee shirt." I haven't seen that for 2 years.
He must appreciate that he's just another dude to you.
Yeah, and again, that's part of it. As I say, everyone's got their persona. And their individual strengths and weaknesses, but I mean, as a crew, it's very tight. So being on the, I mean, look, who gives a flying fig about hanging out with a rock star, because that's not going to win you fights. Look, limousines, nightclubs, all that shit ain't going to win you a fight. Yeah, what's going to win you a fight is a bunch of tight guys around you who would shed blood for you. Right down to the guy who keeps the timer. You have to appreciate everyone in there. So although it's
just
an
like this
individual sport,
podcast.
this is a team sport. You know, it's a team sport. There is a huge team around him. So.
Sorry, I forgot the timer, boys. By the way.
No, producer Ryan's on the clock. He knows
I
what's
wouldn't
going on.
bleed
Just
for it.
just a big. So we've got a big card coming up with City Kickboxing. Got loads of fighters on the bill. So we've got Kai Kara France fighting. We've got Carlos doing his thing as well, and they've got Izzy as well. Now. Those are literally the three sort of, that's the spectrum of fighting, right? You got your guy doing his first UFC debut.
The kickboxer.
Yep. And also you got Izzy going up, looking to be a double champ. And then Kai Kara France, which I'm fascinated with, who came off a loss but got performance bonus of the night. So it's kind of this weird thing. I lost, but the stock went up with him as well.
Yeah.
It's interesting. How do you, as a coach, those three levels?
Well, each guy has a plan.
Yeah.
And you work to that plan. The coaching team sort of discuss what the plans are and shoot ideas, and you just fight. I mean, they're all experienced fighters. Kai had a very, very tough fight with Brandon Moreno, who obviously went very close to Figueiredo, and in my book, with the point deduction, probably should have beaten him. And then you've got, the other Brandon, whose name has slipped my mind, who Kai got guillotined by.
Yes.
But those guys are top.
Royval?
Royval. Top 2 or 3 guys in the world. So that's how close Kai is. Kai rocked rocked them both.
Yeah.
And you know, he just had a couple of technical errors in his development that he needs to work on. He's still a very, very young guy.
Yeah.
So he's got another incredibly tough guy, another guy who's a jiu-jitsu black belt who can take his back, who's got some areas he can be exposed in striking. So he's at that level where every fight is a tough fight, just like Dan Hooker, who fights in the toughest division in the world. You know, and just quickly while I'm here, to all you twats who aren't even worthy enough to pick up his underpants after he's finished training, those guys who get their Twitter fingers going and start slagging a guy, you can get stuffed.
Yeah.
Nice.
And that was me being just a little bit moderate, to be fair.
Yeah. But you don't have to be on this.
Israel Adesanya on social just has such a tight game as well, and he enjoys not only calling people out on Twitter, but just going back and forth, not just with people who are so-called experts, but then other fighters as well. Like, it's just a lot of fun to watch Izzy be a complete, not just MMA fighter, but a star in other aspects. Like, I feel like he's going to get into movies. Like, he says he's got this plan written down, and being in the UFC is just a small part of it. He's got other bigger things on his radar.
Look, yeah, Israel's very much, you know, he has his goals and his power of law of attraction manifestation going with what he's doing, and he's certainly got an X factor. He does things that some of us wouldn't do as coaches. We're like, oh dear, okay, well, you know, but you know. Within what you're doing as well, you can't constrain you guys. You know, there has to be expression, and there has to be individuality to a level. You know, and look, it is part of the modern game and part of marketing that you know, there is a bit of trash, there is a bit of bickering and bantering backwards and forwards, because the fans do engage in that, and they love it. You know.
They'd love to get a bite.
Talking about Junior and Joe fighting, right?
Yeah.
It's going to be the battle of who's the nicest guy.
Yeah, exactly. You go to some press conferences, you're like, come on, guys.
Two young Polynesian men with good families and who are great role models.
Yeah,
you know,
respectful young men. Yeah.
You know,
we don't want that.
You know, come on. You guys, you know, and people are still going on about the whole Shane Cameron David tour, mountain goat, mountain climbing, thing. There, you know, people will take that to heart. They love that. And you know, so thus what Izzy puts out there, a lot of it is to, you know, it is still him, but it's necessary in the game. Same with Dan, if he's talking about Michael Chandler, you know. But you have to do that within the confines of your own personality. Speaking of Junior and Joe, that'll be.
Who do you have there? Because obviously
Junior Farr's out of City Kickboxing.
So look, I'm commentating that. And so being in the coaching setup there, I've actually had to resolve myself from that, because I need to be in a neutral position, and both Junior and Joe are mates. So you know, it's a close fight.
Is it a close fight? Because I get the feeling that Joseph's been there, done it. He's been a world champion. What
I mean by close is it's close to me. Personally.
I see. Right.
If you're looking at the fight, look, let's be brutal. Joe clearly has the greater experience at a higher level.
Yeah.
You know, and Junior, because of the time he had out from his career, you know, raising family, etc., has to make a big step up.
The Rock. Download the Uncut podcast on Rover or anywhere you get your podcasts.